Full Bloom is brought to you in part by the following. Welcome to Full Bloom, the award-winning show that celebrates life. Here's your host, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Full Bloom. I'm Zita Christian. My guest tonight shoots people, but in a way that you would love. Her name is Carrie Draghi, and she is an award-winning photographer. Carrie, thanks so much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I really do want to talk about right up front the awards, because I am so impressed. You, in the 4 years that the Knot wedding, that's K-N-O-T, the Knot wedding company, has been giving the awards for bridal photography. You have won
Three of those times.
3 of the 4 years. That is amazing. And I understand just recently the Bride's Choice Award.
Yes.
So the Knot wedding, that's K-N-O-T,
right,
and the Bride's Choice Award. How are those awards chosen?
Those are they're particularly meaningful awards to me because they're actually chosen by nominations of our brides and grooms, and the companies, the Knot, as well as Wedding Wire, who owns like Martha Stewart Weddings and a number of other wedding planning sites. They will send out a survey about a couple's experiences with their vendors, and so we're sort of given those awards by our couples, which is very sweet.
Very nice.
So,
yeah, that's the best recommendation of all.
I know.
Now I know that. Well, you're in Glastonbury now, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I always like to get a little history of our guests.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, I mean, my photography experience is like next to nothing. Do you remember your first camera?
I do. Well, I played with my dad had my first experience with a camera. My dad had a manual exposure camera, so it would have the little exposure dials that would go back and forth. And I played with that in his. It was like a game for me to try to get the little exposure dial. I didn't know what I was doing, but I but I ended up that was the first camera I played with. But my first camera that I fell in love with was a hot pink LeClick camera. It was a hot disc camera from late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
So and I was always the kid that always had a camera in my hand, and that's where my love of photography started. Was just it was innately something I loved.
So that was when we used film.
Oh yeah.
Okay, now we're digital. Do
yes,
you
we
use
are.
a digital
Yes.
camera?
Yes.
And what kind of camera do you use?
I am a Nikon shooter, props Nikon fans.
Okay.
Yes, I'm a Nikon shooter, and I use a Nikon D3S. It's my new camera for the season.
A new camera for the season. Do you get a different camera for each season?
Every season.
Oh my gosh.
And then we rotate through them. So at any time we have 3 or 4 cameras in operation, and then the new technology comes. The technology makes a big difference when you're shooting in the digital world versus a film camera we could hang on to for years.
You know, I know enough to know that I love the digital photography because I'm not spending so much money on film, but I really know not much else about it. What are some of the advantages now with the digital photography, other than the obvious that you can erase something if you look at it and go, this didn't work?
Well, the advantage of the digital, there's a lot of advantages, and frankly, there's actually a lot of disadvantages as well. One of the advantages is that, from a wedding perspective, I'll speak primarily, is that there's a lot more new photographers, and our work is a lot more, it's much more out there, and so there's a lot of wonderfully, amazingly talented people that have come with this digital revolution. The same is also true. There may be people that maybe don't have the background but feel like, oh, I can see it in the back of the camera, so I might be able to capture someone's lifetime memories. And maybe they're not adequately prepared from a gear perspective as well as from a technology and training perspective to do that. So there's some pros and cons in that respect. One of the disadvantages, I think, and I'll share this to you from a personal level, is I fear that so many people aren't printing their pictures, and when they're not printing them, or even if they are printing them, they're not necessarily printing them professionally. And so I fear that there may be a section of life history from this time period that really isn't recorded because someone had it on a disc somewhere, and so that's somewhat concerning to me, and that really applies to my own family pictures. My children don't have the albums that other children have because, like the shoemaker's children, that have no shoes, my walls are barren.
But
and I do this for a living. I have the
just
photos,
not printed.
right? But I need to print them. That's what I'm concerned about. Is and we back up our data back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But are they never print with we look at our history, our ancestry through these wonderful black and white pictures from the past.
Yes.
And digital printing may not sustain in the same way may not last in the same way that, unless it were printed very, very well. And that's not, people are printing them on, their home printers, and that's not going to last for 125 years, which we would consider archival.
Yeah,
Professional printing.
And that's the acid-free paper?
Yes.
Is that
Yep. And a certain type of processing that they go through. So it's people are used to 29-cent prints at Kodak Gallery, and it's not.
It's not the same.
No.
It's not gonna last.
No.
And that brings that to me brings to mind the obvious importance of having an album.
Yes.
Done by a professional photographer, and we're going to talk about that in in a little while. I really focus a lot on the weddings because, well,
I have a great job.
Absolutely,
Right.
That's really cool. But a little more background. I know that you've had your own studio, Carrie Draghi Photography, in Glastonbury, Connecticut for, 5-6 years?
Carrie Draghi Photography started in 2005, and we've been in our current studio space, which is actually in South Glastonbury, right on Main Street in South Glastonbury. We've been in our current studio space for close to 4 years now.
Okay, but you started working for other photographers. What did you learn from them?
What I learned from I worked with a very, very talented photography studio, and what I learned from them is really proper wedding etiquette. So you learn, independently I learned photography through the darkroom, through classes, through coursework, through college. Independently I learned photography, but how to shoot weddings, I've always felt that to begin in this industry, that was the proper way to do it, to learn where you should stand, how to do family pictures very quickly, and efficiently, and what's important and what's not, and there are certain etiquette things that have sort of been lost by folks not coming up through other photographers in sort of an apprenticeship sort of relationship. So,
like such as what is this etiquette?
Like not to stand on the altar. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding. When I first started, if I say it was a priest that I hadn't worked with, the conversation went a lot like, "Oh, hi, my name's Carrie Draghi. Oh, nice to meet you. Oh, are you related to this Draghi or that Draghi?" Because there's so many. I have a wonderful family, but now the conversation goes a lot more like, "You're the photographer. Okay, I don't want you shooting flash during the ceremony. I don't want you standing on the altar. I don't want you to lay on the middle of the floor. I don't want you to interfere with the ceremony." And to me, those were things that I know, I'm so sorry, sir, I'm so sorry. But so sort of the rules of how people photograph weddings have changed. And I tend to find myself during a ceremony being much more conservative, which is what I learned growing up through another wedding photographer.
Okay. And
you find that pretty unbelievable, huh?
Well, I guess it just never occurred to me.
Yeah.
That, I guess those issues do have to be addressed. I guess that it gets into the whole expectation, which is a conversation, having a conversation about expectations with the bridal couple. But before we get to that a minute, just tell me what in that process, as you're working with another photographer and learning the etiquette and how to shoot a wedding, more than just the etiquette, what made you decide at some point to say, I'm going to open my own studio now, I'm going to go on my own?
Well, a number of things. To be a freelance photographer is to, you hope that you make enough money to pay for your gear. And I knew I wanted to do this full time. And as getting married and knowing that we wanted to start a family, I now have an almost 5-year-old and a 2-year-old at home. And knowing I wanted that I had those personal goals, it wasn't really feasible for me to be working during the week as well as working on the weekends. And so my motivation was to be able to work for myself, to create a mommy-friendly sort of opportunity for myself, and also ironically, we happen to have 3 lovely ladies that all, that we have a great mommy business. And so that's sort of what, it was like a financial decision and a personal decision, and it's been fantastic.
What do you mean 3 lovely ladies? Are other people who work with you?
Yes, I have a studio manager, Colleen, we love. And then Molly, we love them all. Molly does our album design. Colleen has 2 children the same age as mine. And then Molly has a newborn, not yet 1-year-old, and then a daughter too, I think. gosh, Addison must be almost 3 now. So,
So
and then Helen.
everybody's aware then of the
Yes.
hours and
And we help each other out. Someone has we also work with customers who, our customers are coming to us after work or trying to, sometimes the best lighting to take a picture very often the best lighting is not the middle of the day. So we're trying to try and work with couples in the evening. We're doing consultations for couples who are meeting with us for their weddings that are years out. And so they're available, at certain times. They have fluctuating schedules. They need to find a time when they're both available, the bride-to-be and the groom-to-be. So we look out for each other very often. Colin will take my kids, or we'll put the kids in the back room, and one of us will babysit while we take care of something. So we recognize that, and the other thing is that the girls have done a really great job of helping me prioritize my own family this year, so better than I have in the past, to be able to say, when I answer the phone, I'll say, well, I'm not in the studio on Wednesday, but I could be. Is that the only day you can meet? And I would I would make an accommodation, versus when someone else answers the phone and they say, no, Carrie's not in that day. We still manage to meet, and I don't have.
Otherwise,
it's harder for me to say
out.
that. I do. Yeah, I would. Yeah.
But you just said something a second ago that I want to pick up on. You mentioned about sometimes meeting with the prospective couple years out. How far out do you book photographer?
Well, it depends. It depends on where it is in your prioritization. We've booked couples before they were engaged, because we photographed a sibling's wedding or we photographed a friend's wedding, and they knew that they wanted us to be a part of their wedding experience, because that's really what we are, is we're a part of the experience, not just the finished product, but we're interacting with friends and family that day. The bride sees us more than she sees her husband that day, because we start with her when she's getting ready. So some couples know, Carrie, gosh, I want you to be there on my wedding day, and so they'll book us, long in advance. And then sometimes we have couples that, they're maybe later in their planning, or they've been engaged for years, and they just said, this is the year we're going to do it, and if we happen to be available, we've had bookings that have happened 3 to 4 months beforehand, and as far out as we've had a date booked in June now for over 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
So
yeah, speaking of bookings, well, no, let me back up just a minute before we get to the weddings. I want to mention, because I have booked you through the Bushnell to do a number of things at the Bushnell, and I know you do a lot of corporate work and headshots and products, and I know you've worked for some really big companies.
Yeah, we've had the pleasure of doing some really awesome things over the years.
Yeah, and there was W Magazine, one of my favorites.
Yep.
L'Oreal.
We've done some stuff with them.
I look on your website, and I see the real people. I see those shots that are not posed.
Right.
And to me, that's something that characterizes your work.
I think that. I think I understand. Well, first of all, I don't like to be photographed. Ironically, I don't like to be photographed, and I think I take that into my experience as a photographer, and I have a pretty innate ability. Again, I use the word innate, but it is something that comes naturally to me, being able to make people feel comfortable in front of the camera. And very often, the best shots are after we take some shots, and I know that these aren't the shots that are going to be the favorites, but I have to sort of get warmed up and get used to the couple, and I take the time to really get to know folks, so that I can, I get a sense for the sense of humor. So on a wedding day, I feel like I should be able to fit in like a friend with a camera, so I understand them well enough to be able to get some silly shots out of them, their sense of humor, something. Very, very often we're talking during some of these shots, and then I'll have them do something silly, or I'll have them, squeeze their bums or something, and have them catch the other person off guard, so I get this very genuine laugh from the bride or the groom.
Very, very nice. I do want to focus on weddings.
Okay.
Because we have these gorgeous wedding photos here in the studio, and thank you very much for bringing those with us tonight. So, talking about the weddings, on the bride and groom, on the big to-do list, when they decide, okay, we're engaged and we're going to get married, and here's the whole list, because there's wedding planning books, everywhere.
Galore, yes.
Exactly. So where does Book the Photographer come in that list?
Again, it depends on the couple and where we are as a priority, and we see a couple different things. Again, from the couples that book us before they book their venue or before they're even engaged, to the couples that, I would say most typically, first of all, most important choice is who shall you marry after that decision is made, and then a date and a venue for a reception. And very often we see that the church or ceremony location isn't even booked before the venue is booked. And so then after the venue is secured, then very often we're the third caller.
And when you say the venue, you're talking about where the reception
is going to be. Yeah.
Because there's the issue of food.
Right. And then, well, then once that's done, they know they can send out, say, the dates, et cetera, and they can wait on flowers and things like that. Very often but then we also see couples because photography is so important, and it's the one piece that they carry into their family history. Because that's important, we also see people who, and versus, it may be easier to compare apples to apples for some other vendors, say, not to discredit, fantastic DJ friends, and everybody does something very, very differently, but it's easier when you're looking at 5 hours to 5 hours of a venue or a DJ or so many roses from this place cost this much, so many roses from this place. But when you look at photography packages and you look at how things are put together and you look at the vast price range that photography services are offered, I think some couples become overwhelmed with that decision, and so it gets put off. So,
well, speaking of the pricing, how do you price your services?
Well, we have lots of different pricing structures depending upon what we're shooting, because we have different pricing when we do portraiture work for families, corporate work. Sometimes that's more like an hourly basis. For weddings, we only do no more than 2 weddings a weekend, or I only personally shoot no more than 2 weddings a weekend, no more than 30 to 35 a year, done, max. So we don't do an hourly package per se, because we shoot a whole day. And I would reserve my time as opposed to working one day for 4 hours. I'd rather shoot, because if we're doing documentary style shooting, you want to shoot the entire day. So, so we have, for our weddings, we do more of an a la carte approach to pricing, and we have basically like the coverage, and then we have our add-ons. I just found that packages really didn't work well for us. In part, it goes back to my sort of wanting to be able to I'm a flexible person, and the same with me saying, I could come in on a Wednesday. I would say, someone would say, I love package A, but we only need one parent album. I want this
instead of the bacon.
Yeah, and I would say, we'll make that work.
Yeah.
And then my accountant and bookkeeper would call me and say, you are driving me crazy.
Yeah,
so we for weddings we have an a la carte approach, and it's like a base pricing and then our add-ons. So people sort of build their own packages, if you will, but I really don't even like that word.
But they know what they're going to spend.
Yes, typically.
And then they can add if they want more albums or more something later.
Yep.
But they know pretty much.
Yep.
Okay, so talking about this documentary, it's a documentary of this special event in the couple's life. Talk to me about a shot list. What is it, and why is it important?
Well, it's important. It's not important. We need to know what family combination is important. We don't want to find out that after the fact that there are certain family shots that I've been doing for 300 and some weddings now under my belt. So for me to rattle through family pictures as quickly as possible is second nature, and even in such a way that I move the bride as little as possible, because she's probably got she's usually the most difficult one to move physically. So we go through things we normally do, and I'll sit down with a couple and I'll talk about this is what I would normally do, and then what I encourage folks to do too is, but before the wedding day, is to sit down with the other people that are important in your families, and typically that's maybe a mother, and find out what other pictures might be important to them too, so that outside of the shot list, because I don't go through a list, and check it off necessarily. I do, but not in that sort of way. Right. But with the pre-planning, we talk about, we don't want mom to say, oh gosh, we have all your cousins in from out of state 15 minutes before the reception is over, when it's going to take us all that 15 minutes to gather everyone together, and they're all in different locations, versus if we grab them at the right time, we have them all in one particular, it takes us 2 minutes to take that picture, and we know that we've also taken care of what's important to mom. So that's the family history piece of it, that like we have this documentation and this sort of non-traditional approach to wedding photography that we love so much. But then, given that I have this background in film, where you're much more intentional with your pictures.
Well, the expectations.
Yes.
You're fulfilling the expectations of the couple, which they might not even think about. They might even not even realize that they had the expectation until it was all over, if they had not said something up front.
Well, and sometimes we're the one who realizes that when we're going through who the family members are that they want to photograph, we'll be the one who realizes, gosh, there's 3 or 4 generations of women in that picture, and
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
wouldn't that be neat to have? And so
Yeah.
sometimes we are the ones to suggest particular shots that become important pieces of family history that just based on experience, I know I recognize those
course.
opportunities. So
I know that among the many things that you do, you are known. I mean, it's almost it's a signature, a thumbprint for the lighting that you do in the photography. And we're fortunate that you brought a couple of pieces with you tonight. And I do want to talk particularly about first about the 2 vertical pieces.
Okay.
The one behind me, the one behind you. Let's talk about the one behind me.
Behind you.
First, which is just so
Thank
gorgeous.
you.
So
Well,
tell me about the light here. We just got a few minutes.
Well, what happened is I got bored, and so I
Yeah.
started to play with different lighting. And when you take a photography class at any level, they'll tell you don't face the sun. And so I sort of found that I really liked doing it. And so with the right gear, the
little
right
rebel.
I know, so me. With the right gear, with the right training, I'm able to capture a shot like what's behind you. And we have so much fun doing it. People accuse me of photoshopping them sometimes, and there's not a lick of Photoshop in that.
No.
That is out of the camera. The other thing is I don't like sitting in front of the computer all the time. I do it plenty. So the less time I can spend in Photoshop, the closer I can get it in the camera to what I want, then the better off we all
And
are.
so this picture that we are looking at behind
Yes.
me, this is the bride on a boat.
On a boat. That's her parents' boat.
Wonderful.
Thank
now
you.
now let's take a look at the vertical shot that is behind
me.
you.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, looking down Pratt Street in Hartford, and it was this warm, yummy afternoon light, and I wanted to get the sun coming into the camera and the little sunspots coming in. So it really gives you the warmth of what it felt like. But we use this like a portable battery pack and a gigantic softbox, and I have an assistant with me all the time because I don't want that to slow us down. We pop it up, quick, take the shot, and we're able to get it. It feels like you were down there. It feels like you turn around and you looked into the sun and you're squinting because you can see where they are. So
And you see such texture in the picture.
and that's the use of the technology that we use radio transmission to fire the lights when we're outdoors because infrared technology doesn't work, and so that's way too technical.
It really is.
I'm sorry, but I need to have I can't do that with a little tiny flash. I have to have I always make the joke that I'm like fighting the sun. There goes Carrie. She's going to fight the sun again. And because we have these really big, it's a very strong, heavy powered light that we take with us. So
Speaking of the light, Carrie,
Yes.
From a technical standpoint, what are those the round dots, the round circles that you see in light sometimes in photography?
do the little flares?
Yeah,
Little sun flares?
circles.
Yeah, that's just the reflections of the sun coming in and the different layers of the lens, the different glass layers. It's just similar to if you have a dust speck on your glasses and you turn your face and you.
Because in a metaphysical world, that signifies the presence of the spirit realm.
Then we'll say that the spirits are with us and we took those
Absolutely,
pictures.
what a lovely day it was. I really like that. I want to talk about a little non-traditional, and that would be a wedding where it is a second marriage for the couple. And I also want to talk about same-sex weddings. And could you talk a little about the challenges from a photographer's standpoint for each of those?
Well, the second marriage, we've seen second marriages that are smaller, but we've also seen second weddings that are as much a celebration as the first. And
of course, yeah.
And so, so
Maybe
it's
not
not
as
really
nervous.
Yeah, I know. Well, and there's a lot more confidence and they should be big celebrations because this time you've got the right person. So that's awesome.
There you go.
So, so we don't see as many challenges with second weddings as much as, but sometimes with same-sex weddings, we do a number of them, and I enjoy them. I enjoy things that make me think out of the box. And I didn't realize until I photographed my first same-sex wedding that I had specific roles that the man and the woman played. And so sometimes when you meet a couple and you're the same sex, you don't always have, they don't necessarily physically fit, the roles that they have as a couple don't necessarily physically fit what you have in your mind. So you're working with different body types, and you have to really think on your feet, and I love that. So
And you get to know the couple.
absolutely.
And
And what they're comfortable doing,
Exactly. Yeah.
And certainly they wouldn't have hired me to photograph their special day if they weren't comfortable and didn't
Yeah.
feel like they could be themselves in front of me. So
that's important.
yeah. I would say it's the most important piece of hiring a photographer.
well, let's just reiterate then, the most important piece of hiring the photographer is that the couple, whoever the couple is, that they're comfortable being photographed.
Otherwise, they're going to look uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that's key. And now, Carrie, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but do you photograph more than just in Connecticut? Do you travel outside the state?
Yes.
Okay, and do you go to repeat places? You know, there's certain places where people like to have their weddings.
Yeah.
And do you get to know a place and go, oh, if I go there, they have a great garden, or there's a castle or something like that?
Oh, yeah. There's some places that we love to photograph, some beautiful, beautiful venues that we're so fortunate that they recommend us as a preferred vendor at their venues. So so certainly there are places that we go and we feel like we know every nook and cranny, and that's definitely advantageous. But on the other hand, sometimes you get into sort of a comfort zone. And again, the same thing as when you're photographing a same-sex wedding, and sort of the rules might not apply that you're used to. Some of my favorite images are taken in places that I've never been to. I have a beautiful image that remains one of my favorites from 6-7 years ago when we were in Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, photographing a wedding. And certainly I had not had the opportunity to photograph a wedding there. So,
sure.
But I do hope to have any Cape Hatteras viewers out there.
Oh, that would be nice.
So, so you find that again, anything that sort of makes you turn on your creative juices, and sometimes it's a new venue that does that. And
you know, speaking of creative juices, I like to ask people who are obviously in the arts. Tell me a little bit about how each of your parents is or was a creative person.
That's interesting. It's interesting because I was adopted when I was 30 days old, and so genetically I know very little about my biological parents, except that on my they call it non-identifiable information, it does list that my father was artistic, etc. And in my placement with my parents that I know and love, my dad would consider himself an artist. He was the one with the camera, and the one who saw beauty in nature and would comment about things being beautiful and picturesque. And so I think I capture some of that from my dad. And my mom is just a wonderful, good-natured person, and so she's wonderful at making people feel at ease, and I probably get that from her.
And that's a real talent.
It is.
So I'm thinking about, you know, here you come from Colorado and you come out here. The topography is very different.
Yes, it is.
And we've got about a minute. Can you tell me, are there like preferences? Early morning light? I know you don't like the midday.
Well,
late afternoon, evening,
but I
nighttime?
do. See, being a wedding photographer is sort of like being a MacGyver. You know, you can't change the light sometimes. You can't change what time the ceremony is. You can't change the weather. You can't change those things. So I love yummy afternoon light. Morning light, if I were a morning person, I would love that as well. But I found ways, again, this is pretty much shot at high noon, the picture behind you. So I found ways to enjoy all the different types of light. And I love shooting at night, too.
You know, before we go, I want to take just a real quick look at the two photos right down here in front of us.
Oh, yes.
There's two little ones in here, and I think one of them shows advantages. Well, you explain to me.
Well, what I have here is when I meet with couples and I try to talk to them about how it is that I light differently, besides the big pictures that they see when they come in the studio, I show them these traditional. This is how a typical wedding photographer photographs and lights an image, lights a reception. They use a camera with a flash on top.
Yeah.
What happens is that the subject becomes very lit, but the background is dark. This is how we shoot.
Awesome. And that's why you're known for your lighting and photography and why you're getting awards. And Carrie, thanks very much for being here today, for bringing these gorgeous photos with you.
Thank you for having me, Zita.
And this was wonderful. And for you in the viewing audience, thank you also for joining me. A big thanks to my FB crew. And obviously, Carrie, thanks to you. And for you in the viewing audience, please remember, I do know the value of time. And thank you once again for sharing an evening with me. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Full Bloom is brought to you in part by the following: